I stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than my mother's annual salary, my hands trembling as I held a bouquet of white roses that suddenly felt too heavy. The church was packed with people I barely knew, faces of Marcus's family and friends who had looked at me with polite smiles that never quite reached their eyes. I should have seen the signs earlier, should have noticed the way his mother's lip curled whenever I entered a room, or how his father would find excuses to leave family dinners early whenever I joined. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? Or maybe it just makes you hopeful. Marcus stood across from me in his tailored black suit, looking anywhere but at my face. The priest had just asked him the question that was supposed to seal our future together, the words that should have been a formality. I watched his jaw clench, watched a muscle tick in his cheek as the seconds stretched into an eternity. The church fell silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "I can't do this," Marcus said finally, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The words didn't register at first. I stared at him, still smiling because surely this was some kind of joke, some last-minute wedding jitters that we would laugh about later. But then I saw his face, really saw it, and the coldness in his eyes made my blood turn to ice. "What?" I whispered, the bouquet slipping slightly in my sweating palms. "I said I can't do this. I can't marry you, Amara. I'm sorry." He didn't sound sorry. He sounded relieved, like he'd been holding his breath underwater and had finally surfaced. The church erupted into chaos. Gasps and whispers filled the air like a swarm of angry bees. I heard his mother's voice rise above the noise, something about finally coming to his senses, and his father's low grunt of approval. My own family, seated on the bride's side of the church, sat frozen in shock. My mother's hand covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. My younger sister gripped her arm, her eyes wide with horror. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We planned this. We've been together for 3 years. You proposed to me. You said—" "I know what I said," he interrupted, finally meeting my eyes. "But I can't go through with it. My family, they don't approve. And honestly, Amara, I've been thinking about this for months. We're too different. We come from different worlds. This was a mistake from the beginning. Different worlds." The phrase hung in the air between us, and I understood exactly what he meant. He wasn't just talking about our economic differences, about how I grew up in a small apartment while he grew up in a mansion. He was talking about the color of my skin, about how I would never fit into his pristine white upper-class world no matter how hard I tried. "You coward," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "You knew this all along. You knew your family would never accept me, and you let me believe anyway. You let me plan a wedding, invite my family, spend money we didn't have on this dress, on this ceremony, on a future that you never intended to give me." He had the decency to look ashamed, but only for a moment. Then his mother was at his side, her perfectly manicured hand on his shoulder, her expression triumphant. "Come along, Marcus. You've made the right decision. This is all for the best." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear off this dress and throw the bouquet in his face and tell him exactly what I thought of him and his entire bigoted family. But I couldn't move. I stood there frozen, humiliation washing over me in waves so powerful I thought I might drown. The guests were standing now, some moving toward the exits, others clustering in groups to whisper and stare. I could feel their eyes on me, could hear their judgment even when they weren't speaking. Poor girl. She should have known better. What was she thinking? Girls like her don't marry men like him. My father started to rise from his seat, his face dark with anger, but my mother held him back. What could he do? Storm the altar? Demand that Marcus marry me against his will? The damage was already done. I was standing alone at the altar, jilted and humiliated in front of everyone I knew. "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from the back of the church, deep and accented, cutting through the chaos like a knife through silk. Everyone turned to look. A man was walking down the center aisle, and the crowd parted for him instinctively, the way people step aside for someone they recognize as dangerous. He was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my entire wedding, and he moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to ask permission for anything. I didn't recognize him. I'd never seen him before in my life. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice cracking slightly. I saw fear flash across his face, quickly masked but unmistakable. The man didn't answer Marcus. He walked straight past him, past the priest, past Marcus's outraged mother, and stopped directly in front of me. Up close, I could see that his eyes were a striking dark brown, almost black, and they studied my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You deserve better than this," he said quietly, his Spanish accent making the words sound almost musical. "No woman should be humiliated this way." Before I could respond, he turned to face Marcus and the crowd. When he spoke again, his voice carried through the church with absolute authority. "The ceremony will continue. I will marry her." The church fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. This wasn't shock or scandal. This was fear. I watched as Marcus took a step back, his face going pale. His mother's triumphant expression crumbled. Even the priest looked uncertain, his eyes darting between the stranger and the door as if calculating his chances of escape. "You can't be serious," Marcus said, but his voice was weak now, all the arrogance drained out of it. "I am completely serious." The man's tone was pleasant, conversational even, but there was steel underneath. "I have witnessed a disgrace here today. This woman has been publicly humiliated by a man without honor, abandoned at the altar in front of her family and friends. This cannot stand. I will take responsibility for her future. I will marry her today in this church and give her the respect and protection she deserves." I found my voice finally. "I don't even know you. You can't just decide to marry me because you feel sorry for me." He turned back to me and something in his expression softened. "My name is Rafael Sanchez. And I am not acting out of pity, señorita. I am acting out of principle. What has been done to you here today is unacceptable. If you agree to this marriage, I give you my word that you will be treated with honor and respect. You will want for nothing. Your family will be protected and provided for. And if you choose to end the marriage later, you will do so with your dignity intact and your future secure. If you're feeling something right now, let me know in the comments. Would you have said yes in that moment or walked away from everything? I should have said no. I should have run from the church and never looked back. But I looked at Marcus, still standing at the altar with his mother clutching his arm, and I looked at the crowd of people who had come to watch me marry him, and I felt something shift inside me. Rage maybe. Or pride. Or just exhaustion from years of trying to prove I was good enough for people who would never see me as anything more than an outsider. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'll marry you." Rafael Sanchez smiled, and it transformed his entire face. He took my hand, his grip warm and firm, and led me back to the altar. The priest looked like he might faint, but Rafael spoke to him in rapid Spanish, and whatever he said made the priest nod frantically and open his Bible with shaking hands. Marcus tried to protest. "You can't do this. This is my wedding. This is my church. My family." "Your family has no power here," Rafael said softly, and the way he said it made Marcus go silent immediately. "Leave now while you still can." Marcus and his mother fled. I watched them go, watched the guests scramble to follow them out of the church, and felt a strange sense of detachment from the entire scene. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening to me. But it was happening. The priest was reading the ceremony, his voice trembling but audible. Raphael was repeating the vows in that accented voice, his eyes never leaving my face. And then it was my turn, and I heard myself speaking the words that bound me to a complete stranger. When the priest pronounced us husband and wife, Raphael lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for trusting me," he murmured. "I know this must seem insane." "Insane doesn't even begin to cover it," I replied, but I didn't pull my hand away. My family approached cautiously, my mother's face streaked with tears, my father looking like he wasn't sure whether to thank Raphael or punch him. Raphael addressed them with perfect courtesy, introducing himself and assuring them that their daughter would be safe and well cared for. He gave my father a card with a phone number and an address, told them they could contact him at any time, and promised that I would visit them soon. "I don't understand what's happening," my mother said, looking between Raphael and me. "Who is this man? Why did he?" "I'll explain everything later, Mama," I said, though I had no idea how I would explain something I didn't understand myself. "I promise I'm okay. This is going to be okay." I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself. Raphael led me out of the church to a black car waiting at the curb. It was sleek and expensive, the kind of car that probably had bulletproof glass and cost more than most people's houses. A driver stood by the door, his expression carefully neutral, and he opened it for us without a word. I climbed in, still wearing my wedding dress, still holding my bouquet of white roses. Raphael slid in beside me, and the driver closed the door, sealing us into a quiet luxury that felt surreal after the chaos of the church. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Home," Raphael said. "We need to talk, and you need time to process everything that just happened. But first, I thought you might want to change out of that dress. It's beautiful, but I imagine it holds some painful memories now." I looked down at the white lace and silk, at the dress I'd chosen with such hope and excitement, and felt tears prick my eyes. "Yeah. I'd like to change." The drive took us out of the city and into the hills, where the houses got bigger and the gates got higher. Raphael's home turned out to be a sprawling estate surrounded by stone walls and iron gates that opened automatically as we approached. The house itself was massive, all white stone and tall windows, with gardens that looked like they required a full-time staff to maintain. "You live here alone?" I asked as we pulled up to the front entrance. "Not alone," Raphael said. "I have staff. And business associates who come and go. But there's plenty of space. You'll have your own rooms, your own privacy. This doesn't have to be a traditional marriage, Amara. I meant what I said in the church. I'm offering you protection and respect, nothing more." A woman met us at the door, middle-aged and kind-faced, and Raphael introduced her as Elena, his housekeeper. She took one look at me in my wedding dress and immediately ushered me upstairs to a suite of rooms that were larger than my entire childhood apartment. The bedroom had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a bed big enough for 4 people, and a bathroom with a tub that could have been a small swimming pool. "I'll bring you some clothes," Elena said in accented English. "And some tea. You look like you need tea." I did need tea. And possibly a therapist. Or maybe I was already hallucinating from stress and none of this was really happening. But the clothes Elena brought were real enough, soft pants and a sweater that fit perfectly, and the tea was hot and sweet and exactly what I needed. I changed out of the wedding dress and left it in a heap on the floor, unable to even look at it anymore. When I came back downstairs, Raphael was waiting in a room he called his study, though it looked more like a library from a movie, all dark wood and leather furniture and bookshelves that reached the ceiling. He'd changed too, traded his suit for casual clothes that made him look less intimidating but somehow more real. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I'm sure you have questions." "Questions," I repeated, laughing slightly hysterically. "That's one way to put it. How about we start with why? Why did you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you marry a complete stranger just because her fiancé turned out to be a coward?" Raphael leaned back in his chair, studying me with those dark eyes. "I was at the church because I had business in the area. I wasn't planning to attend the wedding, but I heard the commotion and went inside to see what was happening. And I saw you standing there, being humiliated by that man and his family, and I saw the way everyone was looking at you, judging you, and I thought about my own mother." "Your mother?" I wasn't sure what that had to do with anything. "My mother was from Mexico," Raphael said quietly. "Beautiful, kind, hardworking. She fell in love with a Spanish man, my father, who came from a wealthy family. They married despite his family's disapproval, but his family never accepted her. They treated her like she was beneath them, like she didn't belong in their world. And my father, who claimed to love her, allowed it. He didn't defend her. He didn't protect her from their cruelty. She died when I was 15. And I have always believed that their treatment of her contributed to her death." I sat very still, watching emotions flicker across his face, pain and anger and old grief. "When I saw you at that altar," Raphael continued, "I saw my mother. I saw a woman being rejected and humiliated because small-minded people couldn't see past the color of her skin. And I decided I would not stand by and watch it happen again. Not when I have the power to stop it. So this is about your mother," I said slowly. "You married me to, what, make up for not protecting her?" "Perhaps," Raphael admitted. "Or perhaps I married you because I believe that people with power have a responsibility to use it to protect those who are vulnerable. You were vulnerable in that moment, Amara. You needed someone to stand up for you. I chose to be that person." It made a twisted kind of sense, but it also left me with more questions than answers. "You said you had business in the area. What kind of business?" Raphael smiled slightly. "Oh. And now we come to the part where I tell you who I really am, and you decide whether you want to stay in this marriage or run for the nearest exit. My stomach dropped. You're not a serial killer, are you? Please tell me I didn't marry a serial killer. No, he said, and he actually laughed. I'm not a serial killer. But I am. How do I put this delicately? I am a businessman with connections to certain organizations that operate outside the boundaries of conventional law. I stared at him. You're in the mafia. I prefer to think of myself as an entrepreneur with diverse interests, Raphael said lightly. But yes, essentially. I run a significant portion of the Spanish operations in this region, which includes various business ventures, both legal and otherwise. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know what you've married into, and because I won't lie to you. If you want to leave now, I'll arrange it. No judgment, no repercussions. I should have left. Any sane person would have left. But I thought about going back to my apartment, facing my family, dealing with the aftermath of the wedding disaster, and I felt exhausted just thinking about it. What would happen if I stayed? I asked instead. You would live here in safety and comfort, Raphael said. You would be my wife in name, which affords you a certain level of protection in my world. No one would dare harm you or disrespect you. Your family would be protected as well. In return, I would ask for your discretion about my business affairs and your willingness to appear with me at certain social functions where having a wife is advantageous. A marriage of convenience, I said. Precisely. With the option to end it whenever you choose, though I would ask that you give it at least a year. Long enough for the scandal of today to die down and for you to figure out what you want to do next. I thought about Marcus, about his mother's triumphant face, about the whispers and stares in the church. I thought about going back to my job at the bookstore where I knew the story of my ruined wedding would spread like wildfire, where I would be pitted and gossiped about for months. Or I could stay here in this beautiful house, married to a dangerous stranger who had somehow seen me when everyone else had looked away. Hey, I said. I'll stay. For a year. And then we'll see. Raphael nodded, looking satisfied. Then we have an agreement, Mrs. Sanchez. Welcome to your new life. Mrs. Sanchez. The name sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. But then again, maybe that was the point. Maybe I needed to be someone else for a while. Someone who didn't carry the weight of today's humiliation. Elena showed me back to my rooms and explained that dinner would be served at 8 if I wanted to join Raphael, or she could bring a tray to my room if I preferred to be alone. I chose alone. I wasn't ready to sit across a table from my new husband and make polite conversation like this was a normal marriage. I called my mother from the phone in my room and she answered on the first ring. Amara? Baby, are you okay? Where are you? That man, Raphael, he seemed nice, but we don't know anything about him and your father is worried. Mama, I'm fine, I interrupted gently. I know this is crazy. I know you must have a million questions. But I need you to trust me. Raphael is. He's a good man. He helped me when no one else would. And I'm safe here. I promise. But you married him, my mother said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. You married a stranger, Amara. How can that be okay? I don't know if it's okay, I admitted. But it felt right in the moment. And I need some time to figure things out. Can you give me that? Can you just trust me for a little while? There was a long pause and then my mother sighed. I trust you, baby. You've always been smart, always made good decisions. If you think this is what you need to do, then I'll support you. But you call me every day, you hear? Every single day, or I'm sending your father over there. Every day, I promised. I love you, Mama. After I hung up, I stood at the window and looked out at the gardens, at the perfectly manicured lawns and the fountain in the center and the high walls that surrounded everything. Cage, I thought. But maybe a comfortable cage was better than the alternative. I lived in a strange kind of limbo for the first few weeks. Raphael was gone most days, handling his mysterious business affairs, and I was left to explore the house and grounds with Elena as my guide. The estate was enormous, with a library full of books in multiple languages, a gym, a pool, and gardens that seemed to go on forever. Elena cooked elaborate meals that we usually ate separately, Raphael in his study and me in my rooms, or sometimes in the garden if the weather was nice. He was unfailingly polite on the rare occasions we did interact, asking about my comfort, making sure I had everything I needed, but maintaining a careful distance. It was clear he meant what he said about this being a marriage in name only. He never came to my rooms uninvited, never touched me beyond the occasional formal gesture, never indicated that he expected anything from me beyond my presence at occasional dinner parties with his business associates. Those dinner parties were interesting. The people who came to Raphael's home were all wealthy and powerful, the kind of people who spoke multiple languages and wore watches that cost more than cars. They treated me with respect, probably because Raphael had made it clear that disrespecting his wife would be a mistake. But I could see them wondering about me, trying to figure out how a black girl from a modest background had ended up married to Rafael Sanchez. I wondered the same thing most days. 6 weeks after the wedding, I was in the library reading when Rafael knocked on the door. "May I come in?" "It's your house," I said, but I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat, looking slightly uncomfortable, which was unusual for him. "I have a request to make. There's a charity gala next weekend, quite a high-profile event. I need to attend, and it would be beneficial if you came with me as my wife. I know you've been to the dinner parties here, but this would be more public. There will be photographers, society pages, that sort of thing." I set down my book. "Why do you need me there?" "Because certain people in my world expect me to present a certain image," Raphael said carefully. "A stable family man is seen as more trustworthy than a bachelor, more invested in the community. And honestly, Amara, I would like you there. You have good instincts with people. You see through pretense quickly. That's valuable to me." It was the first time he'd asked me for something beyond basic appearances, and I found myself curious about seeing him in that environment. "Hey, I'll go. But I'll need a dress." "Elena will take you shopping tomorrow," Raphael said, and he smiled. "Get whatever you like. Money is not an issue." The shopping trip was surreal. Elena took me to boutiques where the staff recognized her and brought out dresses that cost thousands of dollars, where they served champagne while I tried on gowns that made me feel like I was playing dress-up. I ended up choosing a deep emerald green dress that hugged my curves and made my dark skin glow, with delicate gold jewelry that Elena insisted was perfect. When I came down the stairs the night of the gala, Raphael was waiting in the foyer. He looked up as I descended, and something flickered in his eyes that I couldn't quite read. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," I replied, suddenly nervous. "You look nice too." He did. The tailored tuxedo made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine, all sharp angles and controlled power. The gala was held at a luxury hotel downtown, in a ballroom that dripped with crystal chandeliers and filled with people wearing more wealth than I'd ever seen in one place. Raphael kept me close, his hand at the small of my back as he introduced me to businessmen and politicians and socialites who all smiled and said polite things while their eyes assessed and judged. I met people who barely masked their surprise at Raphael's choice of wife, people who asked subtle questions trying to figure out my background, people who seemed genuinely kind, and others who were clearly calculating whether knowing me was worth their time. And then I met Marcus's mother. She was standing near the bar, holding a glass of champagne and talking to a group of women in expensive gowns. When she saw me, her face went pale, then red, and I watched her excuse herself and march toward us with fury in her eyes. "You," she hissed, stopping directly in front of me. "How dare you show your face here? Haven't you caused enough trouble?" Raphael's hand tightened slightly on my back, a warning or a reassurance, I wasn't sure which. "Mrs. Patterson," he said coolly. "How unpleasant to see you again." "You," she turned on him, her voice rising. "You had no right to interfere in my son's wedding. That was a family matter. You humiliated Marcus, forced him to." "I forced nothing," Raphael interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Your son humiliated himself by his own actions. He abandoned his bride at the altar like a coward. I simply ensured that Amara was not left alone to face that humiliation." "She trapped him," Marcus's mother spat. "Girls like her always do. They use their looks to seduce decent men and then expect." "Enough." Raphael's voice cracked like a whip, and the conversations around us stopped. People were staring now, watching the confrontation. "You will not speak about my wife that way. You will not speak about her at all. And if I hear that you have attempted to spread lies or gossip about her, you will find that I have very little patience for people who attack those under my protection." The threat was unmistakable, and Marcus's mother went even paler. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away quickly, her friends scattering like birds. I was shaking slightly, adrenaline flooding my system. Raphael guided me toward a quiet corner, away from the staring crowd. "Are you all right?" "I should have expected that," I said, trying to steady my breathing. She hates me. They all hate me. They hate that you exist outside their narrow understanding of the world, Raphael corrected. That's not the same thing. And frankly, their hatred says far more about them than it does about you. I looked up at him, at this man who had married me on a whim, who had defended me twice now against people who saw me as less than. Why are you so nice to me? He seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. Why wouldn't I be? You're my wife. And beyond that, you're a person who deserves respect and kindness. This should not be a complicated concept. If this story is reminding you of something you've felt or been through, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. The rest of the gala passed without incident, but I was relieved when Raphael finally suggested we leave. In the car on the way home, I found myself thinking about the look on Marcus's mother's face, the fear that had replaced her anger when Raphael spoke. You scared her, I said into the quiet. Good, Raphael replied. Fear is a useful tool when dealing with people who refuse to be reasonable. But doesn't it bother you? Making people afraid. He was quiet for a moment, considering. I don't enjoy making people afraid. But I've learned that in my world, fear and respect are often the same thing. People who fear you will think twice before betraying you or hurting those you care about. It's not ideal, but it's effective. Is that what I am? I asked. Someone you care about? Raphael turned to look at me, and in the dim light of the car, his expression was unreadable. Yes, he said finally. I suppose you are. It shouldn't have mattered. This was a business arrangement, a marriage of convenience. But his words settled into something warm in my chest, and I realized that somewhere in the past 6 weeks, Raphael had become more than just the stranger who saved me at the altar. He'd become someone I trusted, someone I looked forward to seeing, someone whose approval meant something to me. That realization terrified me more than anything else that had happened. Life settled into a new kind of normal after that night. Raphael started joining me for dinner more often, and we would talk about books and politics and our completely different childhoods. He told me stories about growing up in Spain, about his mother and the way she used to sing while she cooked, about moving to America after she died and building his empire from nothing. I told him about my family, about my father who worked 3 jobs to send me to college, about my sister who wanted to be a doctor, about the small joys and struggles of growing up with too little money but plenty of love. We were sitting in the garden one evening, weeks after the gala, when Raphael said something that changed everything. I've been thinking about our arrangement, he started, and my heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. He's going to end it. He's going to send me away. What about it? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. I was wondering if you might consider making it more permanent. I stared at him. What? Our marriage, Raphael clarified. I know we agreed to 1 year, and I'll honor that if it's what you want. But I find myself hoping that you might want to stay longer. That you might want to make this real. Real, I repeated, my mind spinning. You mean like a real marriage? With all that entails, Raphael finished. If you're interested. I realize I'm not the easiest person to live with. My work is dangerous and often morally questionable. But I care about you, Amara. I've come to care about you quite a lot, actually. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you might care about me too. He was right. I did care about him. Somewhere between the awkward dinners and the late-night conversations and the way he brought me books he thought I'd like and remembered how I took my coffee, I'd fallen for my accidental husband. I do care about you, I admitted. But Raphael, this is crazy. We barely know each other. We know each other better than many couples who've dated for years, he countered. We've lived together, shared space, shared our lives. I know that you hate mornings and love thunderstorms and read the endings of books first when you're nervous about how they'll turn out. I know that you call your mother every day at 3 o'clock and that you cry during sad movies even though you try to hide it. I know that you're brave and kind and stronger than you think you are. And I know that you pretend to be cold but you're not, I said quietly. I know that you donate to children's charities anonymously and that you pay Elena's son's medical bills without telling her. I know that you have nightmares sometimes about your mother and that you drink your coffee black because she used to say adding sugar was wasteful. I know that you're trying to be better than your father, trying to use your power for something beyond just accumulating more power. Raphael reached across the space between us and took my hand. Then you know we could make this work. If you want to try. I looked at our joined hands, at the way his fingers curled around mine, protective and gentle. I thought about the girl who had stood at the altar 2 months ago, devastated and humiliated, and I thought about the woman I was now, living in a mansion with a man who had given me back my dignity when everyone else had tried to take it away. Yes, I said. I want to try. He smiled, really smiled, and pulled me into his arms. And when he kissed me for the first time, soft and careful and full of promise, I felt like I was finally home. The transition from convenient marriage to real marriage was surprisingly easy. Raphael moved some of his things into my rooms, or rather, into our rooms, and we started building a life that felt genuine. He taught me Spanish over breakfast, I introduced him to my family properly, and we figured out how to be partners in every sense of the word. My family was skeptical at first, especially my father, who grilled Raphael about his intentions and his business and whether he could be trusted with his daughter's heart. But Raphael won them over gradually, showing up to Sunday dinners, remembering birthdays, quietly arranging for my sister's medical school tuition to be paid in full. I still don't fully understand how this happened, my mother said to me one Sunday, watching Raphael play with my young cousins in the backyard. But I see the way he looks at you, baby. Like you're the most precious thing in the world. That's all I ever wanted for you. I don't fully understand it either, I admitted. But I'm happy, Mama. Really happy. It wasn't perfect. Raphael's business occasionally intruded in frightening ways, with late-night phone calls and tense meetings and moments when I remembered that the man I loved was also someone capable of great violence when necessary. But he kept me separate from the worst of it, and I learned not to ask questions about things I didn't need to know. We had been married for 8 months, really married for 6, when Raphael came home one evening with an expression I'd learned to recognize as trouble. What happened? I asked, setting down the book I'd been reading. Nothing yet, he said, but he was agitated, pacing the study. But there's a situation developing. Some of my rivals are making moves, challenging my territory. It's probably nothing, but I'm going to increase security around the house for a while. Just as a precaution. Should I be worried? I asked. No, Raphael said firmly. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise. But 2 nights later I woke up to the sound of gunshots. I bolted upright in bed, my heart hammering, and saw Raphael already on his feet, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. Stay here, he commanded. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or Elena. Raphael, what? Do it, Amara. His voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. Yow. He was gone before I could argue, and I locked the door with shaking hands. More gunshots echoed through the house, and I heard shouting, running footsteps, the crash of breaking glass. I grabbed my phone and called 911, but before I could speak, the shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. I waited by the door, holding my breath, until I heard Raphael's voice. Amar, it's me. Open the door. He was unharmed, but there was blood on his shirt, someone else's blood. Behind him I could see other men, his security team, and they were dragging bodies toward the back of the house. Are you hurt? I demanded, running my hands over him, checking for wounds. I'm fine. They didn't get far. My men handled it. He caught my hands, stilling them. I'm so sorry. This should never have happened here, never come so close to you. Who were they? A message, Raphael said grimly. From people who thought they could intimidate me by threatening my home. They were wrong. The police came, and Raphael spoke to them in the way that made it clear this would be handled quietly, no reports filed, no questions asked. I realized then how deep his influence ran, how many people were in his pocket or under his control. After everyone left and the house was secured again, I sat in our bedroom and tried to process what had happened. Raphael sat beside me, still wearing the blood-stained shirt, looking exhausted. This is my life, he said quietly. This is what it means to be married to me. And I understand if it's too much. If you want to leave, I'll arrange it. I'll make sure you're safe and taken care of, but I won't blame you for. Stop, I interrupted. I'm not leaving. I was terrified tonight, yes. But I'm not leaving you because of one scary incident. You've been dealing with this danger your entire adult life, and you've kept me safe. You've kept my family safe. I trust you, Raphael. You shouldn't, he said bitterly. I'm not a good man, Amara. I've done terrible things, hurt people, destroyed lives. You deserve someone better. Maybe, I agreed. But I don't want someone better. I want you. All of you, even the dangerous parts, even the parts that scare me. Because you're also the man who defended me when no one else would, who married me to give me back my dignity, who learned to love me when neither of us was looking for love. That's the man I choose. Every single day, that's the man I choose. He pulled me into his arms then, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I felt his chest shake with emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. I love you, he said against my hair. I know I don't say it enough, but I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. I love you too, I whispered back. Even when you're being stupidly noble and trying to push me away for my own good. He laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Noted. I'll try to be less stupidly noble in the future. The situation with Raphael's rivals escalated over the next few weeks, but he handled it with the cold efficiency that made him so successful in his world. I didn't ask for details, but I heard things, noticed when certain people disappeared from our social circles, saw the way other families started showing Raphael increased deference. Whatever had happened, Raphael had won decisively. Life returned to normal, or at least our version of normal. We celebrated our one-year anniversary with a small party, just my family and a few of Raphael's closest associates. My mother cried happy tears and told Raphael he'd better take good care of her daughter or answer to her. Raphael promised he would, and I believed him. 2 months after our anniversary, I started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, I thought it was just stress or something I ate, but when it persisted for a week, Elena looked at me with knowing eyes and suggested I take a pregnancy test. I stared at the positive result for a full 5 minutes, my mind completely blank. Pregnant. I was pregnant with Rafael Sanchez's child. The mafia boss who had married me out of principle was going to be a father. When I told Rafael that evening, I wasn't sure what to expect. But I definitely didn't expect him to drop to his knees in front of me, press his face against my still flat stomach and cry. Rafael. I asked uncertainly, running my fingers through his hair. I'm going to be a father, he said, his voice muffled against my stomach. I'm going to have a family. A real family. With you. Is that okay? I asked. We never really talked about children. If you're not ready. I'm ready, he said fiercely, looking up at me with tears still on his face. I've been ready since the day you agreed to stay. I was just afraid to hope for this much. He stood and kissed me deeply, cradling my face in his hands like I was made of glass. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for choosing me, for staying with me, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Thank you for seeing me, I replied. When everyone else looked away, you saw me. You saved me, Raphael. In every way a person can be saved. We stood there in our study holding each other, and I thought about the church, about Marcus's rejection, about the stranger who had stepped forward and changed my entire life with 2 simple words. I will. I thought about how the worst day of my life had somehow led to the best life I could have imagined, and I realized that sometimes getting exactly what you thought you wanted would have been the biggest tragedy of all. Our daughter was born on a sunny morning in May, with my mother holding one hand and Raphael holding the other, both of them crying almost as much as I was. She was perfect, with dark curls and Raphael's eyes and a cry that made every nurse in the maternity ward smile. We named her Elena Maria, after Raphael's mother and mine, and when Raphael held her for the first time, I saw his mother's influence in the gentle way he cradled her, heard her voice in the Spanish lullaby he sang softly. My family crowded into the hospital room later, and my father, who had finally fully accepted Raphael, clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You're a good man. I wasn't sure at first, but you've proven it every day. My daughter chose well." Raphael looked at me, at our baby, at the family surrounding us, and smiled. "No," he said quietly. "I'm the one who chose well. I'm the luckiest man alive." Marcus tried to reach out about 6 months after Elena was born. He sent a message through mutual acquaintances, asking if we could talk, saying he'd made a mistake, that he wanted to apologize. I deleted the message without responding. That part of my life was over, closed like a book I'd finished reading. The girl who had stood at that altar waiting for Marcus to claim her didn't exist anymore. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who had a husband who would move heaven and earth to protect her, who had a daughter who would grow up knowing she was loved and valued and never ever less than. If you've made it this far, you're part of something bigger. Subscribe if you believe everyone deserves a second chance at their story. Raphael expanded his legitimate business interests over the next few years, slowly moving away from the more dangerous aspects of his work. It was a gradual transition, but by the time Elena started school, he was primarily focused on real estate development and import-export businesses that existed entirely within legal boundaries. "I want to be around to walk her down the aisle someday," he explained when I asked about the changes. I want to meet my grandchildren. And I want you to sleep peacefully at night without worrying that someone is going to come through our door with a gun. We had 2 more children, a son we named Diego and another daughter we named Sofia. Our house filled with noise and laughter and the chaos of raising 3 children who had inherited their father's stubbornness and their mother's tendency to question everything. Elena grew up knowing she had 2 grandmothers she'd never meet but who loved her from wherever they were, knowing she came from 2 cultures and belonged fully to both, knowing that her parents' love story was unconventional but real. When she was 10, she asked me about how Raphael and I met. I told her an edited version, leaving out the worst details but keeping the essential truth. That her father had stood up for me when no one else would, that he had given me a chance at a new life, that love sometimes arrives in the most unexpected ways. So he's like a superhero, Elena said seriously. He saved you. We saved each other, I corrected gently. That's what love does. It saves us from the worst versions of ourselves and helps us become who we're meant to be. Raphael and I celebrated our 10th anniversary with a trip back to the church where we'd married. It looked smaller than I remembered, less intimidating. We sat in the pews where my family had sat that day, and I thought about the terrified woman I'd been, standing at the altar in her white dress. Any regrets? Raphael asked, taking my hand. Not a single one, I said honestly. You. Only that I didn't meet you sooner, he replied. That I couldn't save you from that first heartbreak. But I'm grateful for every day since. We renewed our vows that day with our children watching and my family surrounding us and Elena the housekeeper crying happy tears in the front row. The same priest who had married us the first time, looking much older now, spoke about the grace of unexpected blessings and the mysterious ways that love finds us. This time when Raphael said I will, I knew exactly what he was promising. And when I said it back, I meant it with every part of my being. Years passed. Our children grew. Raphael's empire became almost entirely legitimate, though he maintained enough connections to keep our family protected. My mother and father retired to a house Raphael bought them, comfortable and happy. My sister became a doctor just like she'd always dreamed. And I wrote a book. It was a novel, fiction but inspired by truth, about a woman who was saved at the altar by a stranger and how that moment changed everything. It was published to modest success. Enough that I got invited to book clubs and small literary events where women would tell me their own stories of unexpected love and second chances. You gave me hope, one woman told me after a reading. I was in a terrible relationship and reading your book made me realize that I deserved better. I left him. And now I'm happy, truly happy for the first time in years. That moment, more than any amount of money or fame, made everything worth it. Raphael and I grew older together, watching our children become adults and start their own lives. Elena became a lawyer who specialized in defending people who couldn't afford proper legal representation. Diego went into business with his father, bringing a new ethical focus to the company. Sofia became a teacher working in underprivileged communities. All 3 of them had learned what Raphael and I had learned. That power should be used to protect, that privilege comes with responsibility, that love means standing up for people when they can't stand up for themselves. On our 25th anniversary, Raphael took me back to the church one more time. We were alone this time, just the 2 of us, and we sat in the quiet sanctuary where our lives had collided so unexpectedly. I've been thinking about that day, Raphael said. About the moment I walked down this aisle and decided to marry you. And I've realized something. What's that? I asked, leaning my head on his shoulder. I always wondered if I did it for my mother to make up for not protecting her. Or if I did it because I was angry at injustice. Or if it was just impulse, a reckless decision that happened to work out. And what do you think now? I think I did it because I saw you, Raphael said simply. Not a victim to be saved or a cause to be defended. I saw you, Amara. Your strength and dignity and the way you held yourself together even when everything was falling apart. And I thought, this is a person worth knowing. This is a person I want in my life. Everything else was just an excuse to act on that instinct. I turned to look at him, at the man who had aged gracefully, silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes from years of smiling. I saw you too, I said. Even then, standing there in shock, I saw something in you. Something good and protective and real. That's why I said yes. Not because I was desperate or afraid, but because I saw who you could be to me. Who I could be to you. He kissed me there in the church, slow and sweet, and I tasted 25 years of shared life in that kiss. Every joy and sorrow and ordinary moment that had built our extraordinary love. We left the church together, hand in hand, and drove back to our home where our children and grandchildren were waiting to celebrate with us. The house was full of noise and love and life, everything I'd never dared to hope for when I stood at that altar in my white dress. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Raphael found me in the garden, standing under the stars. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood there in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after years of learning to speak each other's language. "Thank you for saying yes," Raphael murmured into my hair. "For trusting me. For building this life with me. Thank you for saying I will," I replied. "For seeing me when everyone else looked away. For giving me a second chance at everything." We stood there until the stars began to fade, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and had somehow made it work. Not because it was easy or because we were perfect, but because we chose each other, every single day, through everything life threw at us. And that, I thought as Raphael took my hand and led me back inside, was the real love story. Not the dramatic rescue at the altar or the dangerous mafia background or the luxury and protection. The real love story was in the choosing, the daily decision to see and value and fight for each other year after year until death did us part. Marcus tried to contact me one more time years later after his second divorce. Raphael showed me the message but didn't read it himself, leaving the choice to me. I deleted it without opening it. Because that's the thing about second chances. You don't owe them to people who didn't value you the first time. You give them to yourself, and if you're lucky, someone worth having walks through the door at exactly the right moment and says, "I will." Raphael had been that person for me. And I had been that person for him. Two broken people who had saved each other and built something beautiful from the ruins of what came before. That was enough. That was everything. The years continued to pass, gentle and full, and we lived them together. Teaching our grandchildren, traveling to places we'd always wanted to see, sitting in our garden and remembering the strangers we'd been in that church all those years ago. And every year on our anniversary, Raphael would take my hand and say, "I will. I still will. I always will." And I would reply, "Me too. Forever." Because the best love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other. They're about imperfect people deciding to see each other clearly and love each other anyway through everything until the very end. We got our forever. Against all odds, despite the impossible beginning, we got our happy ending. And it started with two words spoken by a stranger in a church. "I will."